As you may know, tonight is the evening before the beginning of Rohatsu. And Rohatsu is the name of it's the period, it's the week before, leading up to December 8th. And December 8th, in this tradition, is when we mark the Buddha's awakening. This becomes a sesshin, it becomes a retreat. And monks and lay people around the world just sit, really, from December 1st through the night of December 7th, and then they finish on December 8th in the morning, because the Buddha also finished in the morning. And when we talk about this moment, we talk a lot about what happened beneath the Bodhi tree. We talk a lot about what happened that morning. I think we don't talk so much about what's happening just before. What is happening in this week leading up to that moment in the Buddha's life? What got him there? Whatever got him there is just as important as him being there. It's just as important as what he did there, because without one, you don't have the other. What happened was the Buddha hit a kind of wall. He had practiced and practiced and practiced. For 6 years he practiced. He tried everything. He learned everything that was being taught. And it didn't get to the heart of his question about suffering. All those years before, he had stepped outside and he had seen suffering, really seen it for the first time. And that had set him on this path, a path which, remarkably, he never veered from. One day, something changed for him so dramatically. Something was so clear to him. The problem so perfectly articulated in his mind that he started going in one direction and he never changed course. Not really. He tried this, he tried that, but he was always looking toward this. And after 6 years of trying and failing and trying and failing, he reached a point where he knew he had to take a stand. The way that the story is told to us, he saw suffering, he saw sickness, old age, and death as a kind of injustice.
Słucham.
An injustice that he couldn't really bear. He made his stand, and he did so by sitting down. But still, he looked at the universe, he looked at reality. Because who else do you look to? Who else can take responsibility for something of this magnitude? He looks at the whole world. And he says, I'm not moving until this is resolved. What does this mean for us? If you're like me, it raises some difficult questions. Everything that the Buddha saw that set him on this path, everything that the Buddha saw that got him to that moment of pure resolve I have also seen, and so have you. But our paths may look different from his. That's worth exploring. What was it about his experience that turned his awareness into a responsibility? In simple terms, he was just so ready. He was so sensitive to the thing. He didn't know. He didn't know about sickness. He didn't know about old age. He didn't know about death. And so when they hit him so hard that he was transformed forever by them. It must have been devastating what he saw, what he felt on that day. That's not what our lives are like. We grow up and we know about sickness, we know about old age, we know about death, and we know about so much more. Every day, if you read the news, it's 1,000 little cuts. We know about more kinds of suffering than the Buddha could ever have imagined. We are witness to them every day. We hear those stories every day. But we don't have that privilege of being shocked. Not usually. I want to be very clear in my own mind, as a reminder to myself that there is a distinction between holding the suffering of the world and learning to compartmentalize it. There is a difference between looking at it and seeing it. This is very tricky territory. Because to a degree, the more that we look, the harder it gets to see. And so while the Buddha's resolve went from total ignorance to a place of having to solve suffering for all beings, we may have to start with a different resolve. We may have to start with the resolve of simply not looking away. The resolve to see what's happening. And to do that, we don't have to look at everything. We don't have to look at every detail. We don't have to understand every specific kind of suffering. Though it matters to do so. We just have to understand that there are two parallel tracks, in a sense. One, the one that I think most of us are engaged in, if we care about the world, if we read the news, if we look out our windows every day, is of trying to make sure that we know what's going on. We read about all the injustice of the world. We read about the pain. We read people's stories and we see statistics. And we know what happened and we know what's coming. That kind of seeing, that kind of knowledge of suffering, of the specifics of suffering, is what turns the wheel of civilization. We need it. But what the Buddha saw was not the specifics of suffering, not the details, not every manifestation. What the Buddha saw and was able to see through to was the nature of suffering, the universality of suffering, the core of what it was, and the double pain of it being inescapable. That kind of seeing, that knowledge of suffering, of the nature of suffering, of the truth of it at its core, is what turns the wheel of the dharma. And in order to do that, in order to see that, in order to hold that, we have to allow ourselves, as he did, to be broken open by it. Not by every single story. Not by everything we see on the news. I don't mean that. We have to choose right now to allow ourselves to be broken open by what we already know. And then to stay exposed. To stay raw. To not compartmentalize that. To not only take it up when we're ready. To not put it in a category. But to rest in knowing the thing that we don't want to know. All the time. That's what the Buddha did. That's what got him to that place. So 2,600 years ago, he's walking, he's pacing, he's coming to something. He's coming to a conclusion that his techniques, his tricks are not enough. That his determination is not enough. That what this moment requires, what he requires to see it through, is to make an irreversible choice. A choice to not move. Ever. Until it is resolved. what gets us from here to there? In the story, we know. We know what gets us from here to there. It's not impossible. It just hurts. And that's where I'll stop.